On February 20th, 1943, just north of Kasserine Pass in Tunisia, the official accounts of the clash failed to convey the astonishing sights that greeted German tank officers that dawn. U.S. Sherman tanks were pulling off tactical shifts that challenged every principle in Wehrmacht teachings about operations lacking direct visual cues. Amid the swirling haze and fog of war across the rugged North African landscape, a group of 5 Shermans, divided by jagged ground that blocked any direct views among them, advanced toward enemy lines with coordination that bordered on the uncanny. There were no banners waving, no signal rockets bursting, no messengers darting from one machine to the next. Still, they operated like a unified entity, with every vehicle shielding vulnerabilities the rest overlooked, and every team fully aware of their allies' exact locations. Inside the German Panzer IVs fitted with FUG-5 radios, commanders fought to catch orders from their unit heads amid interference that drowned out their amplitude modulation setups. Those 10-watt German broadcasting units, cutting edge for their time in the 1930s, proved useless beyond a couple hundred meters once the vehicles were in motion. The majority of German tanks came with just listening devices, leaving them powerless to relay observations or summon support. American tank crews wielded a technological edge that the Germans could scarcely comprehend. Equipped with frequency modulation radios in each vehicle, featuring crystal-controlled accuracy, 25 watts of output power, and signal purity that pierced the roar of engines and the turmoil of combat as effortlessly as a blade slicing silk. Far removed, some 8,000 miles from the bustling production lines of Detroit, the pivotal technological superiority of the Second World War emerged into sharp focus. This edge lay not in the heft of plating or the bore of cannons, but in the unseen pulses of electromagnetic spectrum that linked every U.S. armored unit in manners the Wehrmacht could never have foreseen. The shift took hold on July 22, 1941, as the U.S. Army adopted the Signal Corps models SCR-508, SCR-528, and SCR-538 as the standard for all medium tanks. Meanwhile, as German troops pushed forward across the Soviet Union with strategies hinging on radio links among command units, engineers at the Galvin Manufacturing Company, destined to become Motorola, were refining frequency modulation innovations that would soon leave German equipment woefully outdated. Among the key engineers was Daniel E. Noble, the innovator who first envisioned adapting FM technology for use in military vehicles, alongside Henryk Magnoski, the lead RF specialist who overcame the difficulties of integrating advanced electronic systems into the rugged conditions inside a tank. This invention tipped the scales at 181 pounds and effectively turned each Sherman tank into a connected point within the globe's inaugural network for battlefield operations. The BC-604 transmitter produced 25 watts of output, fully 2.5 times greater than that of the German FUG-5. Functioning across the 20.0 to 27.9 Beridu-Harana band, the system offered 10 preset channels maintained by crystal-based precision for reliable performance. Within the SCR-508 setup, the pair of BC-603 receivers enabled leaders to track several frequencies at once, a feature that would ultimately tip the balance during engagements. The true breakthrough, however, stemmed from the essence of frequency modulation. Through Edwin Armstrong's FM approach, granted to the armed forces under license, the persistent crackle and disruptions that tormented amplitude modulation setups were banished. In contrast to German tank communications, which captured all electrical sparks as unwanted racket, U.S. FM systems ensured crisp audio transmission amid the chaos of shelling. November 8, 1942. The Allied invasion known as Operation Torch marked the arrival of U.S. armored units in the North African theater. Tanks from the 2nd Armored Division came ashore close to Safi and Fadala, equipped with SCR-508 radios that would quickly highlight their edge over German systems. Even though the Afrika Korps represented the Wehrmacht's battle-hardened elite in armored warfare, it labored under profound constraints in its communication network. In a typical German tank platoon consisting of 5 vehicles, just 1 or 2 possessed complete FUG-5 transceivers, which allowed for both sending and receiving signals. The other tanks were fitted solely with FUG-2 receivers. These setups let them pick up directives but prevented any replies or updates on faux locations. Operations in German tank platoons relied on a strict chain of command. The platoon commander would issue instructions via radio, and the junior tanks would confirm receipt by carrying them out without verbal feedback. If a command vehicle, readily spotted by its array of antennae, got knocked out, the whole platoon could descend into disarray. Such a weakness would turn disastrous when facing U.S. troops, in which any tank had the potential to step into a leadership role. The clash at Kasserine Pass, spanning February 14 to 24, 1943, offered the initial stark showcase of U.S. radio dominance. Although the Germans claimed a tactical triumph, the engagement exposed strengths that left Wehrmacht analysts reeling. Amid the chaotic combat, dispersed units from the U.S. 1st Armored Division kept their lines open over a sprawling 50-mile front. Crews from tanks that had never linked up before managed joint assaults, alerted one another to dangers, and summoned artillery fire via pristine FM channels. German eavesdropping teams captured U.S. signals and marveled at their crisp quality and seamless teamwork. The intelligence arm of the 10th Panzer Division documented how American groups sustained contact at distances that yielded mere noise on German sets. Even more alarming was the dawning awareness that seemingly all U.S. tanks could transmit freely, rather than limiting that to leaders alone. The German FUG-5 sets, which used amplitude modulation across the 27.0 to 33.3 MHz band, were plagued by inherent flaws. In optimal scenarios, the 10-watt transmitter managed a range of just 2 to 3 kilometers, but this shrank to only a few hundred meters amid the motion of vehicles. The constant sparks from ignition plugs, the hum of electric motors, and the clatter of treads all created disruptions that overwhelmed amplitude modulation setups, leaving them unable to sift out the noise. When U.S. armored forces arrived in Italy during September 1943, the rugged, elevated landscape was expected to undermine any edge from radio communications. Yet, in such challenging environments that left German amplitude modulation devices entirely ineffective, frequency modulation technology emerged as particularly advantageous. The SCR-508's use of frequency modulation coped far superiorly with the signal bounces echoing through narrow mountain passes compared to traditional amplitude modulation. U.S. tank crews managed to synchronize their advances across landscapes where line-of-sight signaling was out of the question and where German radio systems broke down altogether. As they pushed forward to Cassino, American armored formations displayed tactical prowess that left German commanders baffled. Platoons of tanks, divided by steep crests, executed joint assaults with remarkable accuracy. something German military principles insisted, demanded direct visual oversight. Reports from the 1st Armored Division after operations highlighted everyday instances of such linkage over spans that yielded nothing but crackling silence on German frequencies. On June 6, 1944, with Sherman tanks disembarking from assault boats onto Normandy's shores, the SCR 508 units kept reliable links to offshore artillery barrages, a level of integration beyond the reach of German equipment. However, the intense combat amid the hedgerows exposed a serious shortfall. Radios in tanks were unable to link up with those carried by foot soldiers, since the latter's SCR 300 sets worked across 40.0 to 48.0 Fuhrs, clashing with the tank's 20.0 to 27.9 mmHz band. This disconnect turned fatal in the dense bocage terrain, allowing German foot troops armed with Panzerfausts to creep close to U.S. tanks undetected, as nearby American infantrymen lacked any means to alert them. Within mere weeks, though, U.S. ingenuity bridged that divide. Crews operating tanks affixed EE-8 field telephones inside ammunition containers that had been fused to the vehicle's outer hulls, connecting them straight to the onboard communication systems. During Operation Cobra, toward the end of July, this straightforward adaptation transformed the way tanks and infantry worked together on the battlefield. From July 25th through 30th, 1944, the campaign known as Operation Cobra revealed the complete extent of the United States edge in radio technology. Under the leadership of Major General Edward H. Brooks, the 2nd Armored Division managed more than 200 Sherman tanks using interconnected radio systems, achieving a level of command over the field that had never been seen before. Soldiers from Germany's Panzer Lehr Division confronted opponents who appeared to have an almost otherworldly sense of the surroundings. Tanks from the American side reacted without delay to dangers spotted by fellow units positioned several miles distant. Barrages from artillery, directed via the tank's radio channels, landed just moments after spots were called in. The disparity between Allied and Axis communication methods could not have been more pronounced. What had been the Wehrmacht's top armored unit, the Panzer Lehr Division, now struggled with a severe lack of reliable messaging tools. The majority of its vehicles lacked any radio equipment at all, forcing reliance on line-of-sight flags or markers amid landscapes where sight lines seldom stretched beyond 100 meters. Those radios that did work were plagued by static disruptions and short transmission distances which made any meaningful synchronization impossible. The striking contradiction could not be overlooked. Germany had led the way in integrating radio technology into mechanized combat. Heinz Guderian, the mastermind behind blitzkrieg tactics, had championed the inclusion of radio gear in tanks as early as the 1920s. In his 1937 publication, Achtung Panzer, he stressed that effective coordination formed the backbone of tank maneuvers. Guderian pioneered radio networks that allowed tank commanders to synchronize their offensives seamlessly. He recognized clearly that swift armored thrusts depended on dependable lines of contact. Nevertheless, come 1943, Germany's manufacturing output failed to supply the radios essential to Guderian's very strategy. Data from German industry laid bare the dire situation. That year, the nation produced around 5,700 medium tanks, yet managed only under 2,000 FUG-5 transceivers. A significant portion of these devices ended up in command vehicles and assault guns, which meant frontline tank crews faced acute shortages of vital comms tools. the Red Army's armored units grappled with even more severe deficits in radio capabilities. Although the T-34 stood as the most prolifically built tank among the Allies, it usually rolled into battle devoid of any onboard radios. Soviet military strategy leaned heavily on visual flags and meticulous pre-engagement briefings, leading to disastrous outcomes when clashing with German troops in 1941. Lend-Lease aid from 1943 onward offered partial alleviation. U.S.-supplied units, such as the SCR-508 models, outfitted key Soviet command vehicles. Still, right up to the conflict's close, radios appeared in just roughly 25% of Soviet tanks. This disparity underscored U.S. prowess, as the Soviets labored to radio-equip even a fourth of their fleet, whereas America rolled out advanced FM systems across every single tank. At its zenith, Motorola's plant in Chicago exemplified the full might of American wartime industry. Prior to the conflict, the firm specialized in civilian automobile receivers. Shifting to defense contracts demanded total overhaul of machinery and overcoming novel engineering hurdles. Assembling a single SCR-508 demanded 2,748 precisely crafted parts. Within the BC-604 transmitter alone, engineers incorporated 474 capacitors alongside 385 resistors. Engineers designed crystal oscillators to deliver unwavering frequency stability, even under harsh temperature fluctuations and intense vibrations. The numbers from production records vividly illustrated the scale of U.S. manufacturing prowess. In 1942, 300 to 800 radios from the SCR-508 series rolled off the lines. By 1943, that figure climbed to 11,400 units, and in 1944 it surged to 24,000. Across the entire war effort, more than 50,000 tank radio sets were produced in total. This remarkable output guaranteed that every one of the 49,300 4 Sherman tanks built during the conflict came equipped with advanced radio systems, a feat unmatched by any other country. The SCR-508 offered benefits that extended far past basic frequency modulation capabilities. Thanks to crystal-controlled precision, tank crews could lock in channels ahead of engagements and hold steady through the chaos of battle. Unlike the German FUG-5 radios, which relied on variable capacitor tuning and frequently lost their tuning amid operations. With its dual receiver setup, the system let commanders track both their platoon's network and the broader company command channel at the same time. This facilitated rapid transmission of directives through the hierarchy, all while keeping leaders informed about developments among their units below. The BC-606 intercom linked smoothly with the radio, empowering every crew member to signal the commander about dangers. Equipped with throat microphones and headphones that canceled out noise, the setup ensured reliable exchanges amid the din of fighting. In contrast, numerous German tanks operated without any intercoms, leaving crews to rely on physical gestures or yells for coordination. Yet another edge for the Americans lay in their approach to power management. The SCR-508 radio functioned using either 12 or 24-volt systems, seamlessly adapting to whatever voltage was on hand. Its dynamo-based power source delivered consistent, filtered electricity that effectively blocked out any electrical noise. In contrast, German radios drew power straight from their vehicles' electrical setups, capturing every electrical spark as unwanted static. The strategic benefits of widespread radio use reshaped the U.S. approach to armored warfare. Central to this was the Combat Command Framework, which relied on adaptable task forces tailored to particular objectives and hinged completely on dependable radio links. U.S. leaders had the assurance to assemble impromptu combat teams from various divisions, knowing their radios would enable smooth synchronization. Such adaptability left German officers perplexed, as they were bound by inflexible hierarchies imposed by their constrained communication options. In the September 1944 clash at Aricot, the 4th Armored Division confronted several German Panzer brigades outfitted with top-tier Panther tanks. The enemy held clear superiority in both armored protection and offensive capability. Yet, the precision of American radio networks turned the tide. Each Sherman tank relayed foe locations without delay. Tank destroyers obtained firing cues from tanks beyond their line of sight. Meanwhile, artillery spotters positioned in Sherman command vehicles summoned destructive shelling strikes in mere minutes. In a span of 3 weeks, the 4th Armored Division eliminated 281 German armored vehicles, suffering just 41 Sherman losses in the process. A remarkable 7-to-1 kill ratio that challenged the expected performance limits of their equipment. Across the entire conflict, German intelligence officers overlooked the critical edge provided by U.S. advancements in communications. While frontline dispatches acknowledged the effectiveness of American tactical synchronization, they chalked it up to superior drills instead of underlying innovations. One intercepted intelligence evaluation from September 1944 observed that American tank formations exhibited strong radio protocols and seamless teamwork. Such proficiency seemed to stem from thorough drills and strict protocols for messaging. Yet the analysis entirely overlooked the role of superior technology. German strategies remained unchanged in the face of U.S. strengths. Forces kept aiming at what they believed were lead command vehicles, guided by visible antenna setups, unaware that each Sherman tank possessed the ability to direct actions across the field. They set up traps expecting that isolated American units would falter in unity, failing to recognize how wireless links preserved group integrity even without line-of-sight connections. March 1945. When U.S. troops neared the Rhine River, their edge in communications hit its highest point. The seizure of the Remagen Bridge highlighted the rapid efficiency of American leadership and oversight. Upon the 9th Armored Division's discovery of the undamaged Ludendorff Bridge, updates via radio arrived at 1st Army Command Post in mere minutes. Just 1 hour later, units spanning the whole line of advance began repositioning to capitalize on the breach. In contrast, German troops, who relied heavily on landline phones that U.S. planes had methodically taken out, found it impossible to match that pace of reaction. Through expert use of radio systems, American forces built an unbreachable safeguard around the foothold. Armored units from various companies blended effortlessly, synchronizing their artillery support over wireless channels. Lacking proper synchronization from their own breakdowns in messaging, the enemy's assaults trickled in sporadically and met with systematic annihilation. April 1945. The closing of the Ruhr Pocket exemplified the peak of U.S. dominance in communications during the war. Armored forces belonging to the 1st and 9th Armies executed an intricate dual encirclement, relying solely on radio signals for synchronization. Within this trapped area, some 325,000 soldiers of the German forces became isolated, in large measure due to the breakdown of their own communication systems. U.S. fighter bombers, directed by forward air controllers outfitted with radios, methodically targeted and neutralized key German communication centers. As a result, Wehrmacht formations could no longer reach out to their superior commands or maintain links among themselves. In his last dispatches prior to the total cutoff, Field Marshal Walter Model laid bare the desperate situation facing the Germans. No links to neighboring forces. No lines to upper command. Combat persisted, yet effective teamwork had become unattainable. The overwhelming edge in radio capabilities held by the Americans deeply influenced the mental toll of armored combat. During World War II, the tank operators of the United States operated with a constant awareness that isolation was merely physical, not total, thanks to the invisible links provided by radio signals. In stark contrast, the German Panzer units endured a deep sense of disconnection, compelled to wage their struggles in solitude even as they formed part of broader conflicts, since effective contact between them proved impossible. In his post-war account, Tigers in the Mud, Chans, the acclaimed German tank leader Otto Carius, described the difficulties arising from such restricted signaling, although his emphasis lay primarily on battlefield maneuvers rather than the broader void in connectivity. These disparities carried weighty consequences for the overall war effort. The relentless momentum of U.S. forces in the campaigns of 1944 and 1945 owed much to their superior radio systems, which allowed seamless synchronization that their adversaries simply could not replicate. The swift thrust of the Third Army through France hinged on these communication grids, enabling command oversight spanning vast distances of hundreds of miles. High-ranking German officers repeatedly misjudged the strengths of their American foes, failing to grasp the extent of the technological edge in radio capabilities that the Allies held. Serving as Inspector General of Armored Troops, Heinz Guderian identified this critical shortfall, yet found no way to address it. Within a memorandum dated December 1944, he conceded that the exceptional teamwork displayed by American units effectively canceled out the superior design features of German armored vehicles. Following the capitulation of Germany, teams from American technical intelligence conducted thorough assessments of captured enemy hardware. Their conclusions aligned closely with insights gained from frontline encounters. While German tanks frequently excelled in protective plating and firepower, they suffered from disastrously inadequate radio systems. U.S. Army Technical Intelligence Report number 176 determined that the communication systems in German tanks lagged roughly 5 years behind those used by American forces. Key shortcomings included the lack of frequency modulation capabilities, restricted availability of radios, and inadequate shielding against electrical interference, all of which exposed significant weaknesses. Assessments by Soviet analysts echoed these findings. After examining seized German gear, the Red Army opted to adopt American radio technologies for their own advancements in the years following the war, rather than replicating the German models. Figures on manufacturing and fielding underscore the scale of U.S. success in this domain. In the realm of American radio output, models such as the SCR-508, SCR-28, and SCR-38 saw more than 50,000 units manufactured. Meanwhile, production of Sherman tanks totaled 49,324 vehicles. Every one of these tanks came equipped with a radio, achieving full deployment coverage. Their output strength measured 25 watts, with frequency precision maintained through crystal control to within plus or minus 0.2 to 1%. In motion, the American SCR-508 radios achieved a reach of 7 miles, while at a standstill, they extended to between 10 and 15 miles. On the German side, around 6,000 FUG-5 transceiver units were manufactured, though only about 20% saw full installation across the roughly 12,000 medium-heavy tanks produced. These German systems operated at 10 watts of output power, with frequency consistency fluctuating by plus or minus 1%. Their effective distance in movement ranged from 0.5 to 1 mile, improving to 2 to 3 miles when halted. When assessing operational impact, the differences in connectivity proved stark. U.S. forces typically coordinated artillery strikes in just 3 to 5 minutes, compared to the German average of 15 to 30 minutes. Every American tank benefited from seamless synchronization at a 100% rate, whereas only 20% of German vehicles maintained complete radio linkage. This edge in radio capabilities for the Sherman tanks laid down enduring doctrines for tank combat that still shape the field. Today's primary battle tanks feature advanced communication arrays evolving straight from the SCR 508's legacy. Now digital instead of analog, yet rooted in the same emphasis on widespread integration and dependable teamwork. Drawing from the hard-earned insights of the Second World War, the German Bundeswehr, reformed during the 1950s, placed heavy focus on radio infrastructure. All Leopard tanks built since then have included robust communication setups. As noted directly in a Bundeswehr instructional guide, the way lesser American machines overcame stronger German ones through better radios demonstrates a key truth. Mastery of data trumps hardware advantages. Contemporary battles underscore this enduring principle. During the 1991 Gulf War, Allied troops leveraging advanced communication systems overwhelmed Iraqi units that boasted individually superior Soviet-engineered tanks, yet suffered from subpar radio capabilities. In 2003, U.S. military operations once more illustrated how network-based combat strategies outmaneuver platform-focused approaches. The triumph of American Sherman tanks through radio dominance marked a pivotal conquest within the electromagnetic domain, ultimately carrying greater weight than any edges in protective plating or offensive power. Cruise-operating German tanks waged their campaign in partial ignorance of this paradigm shift, realizing far too belatedly that each Sherman was far more than a mere combat machine. It served as an integral link in the inaugural networked battlefield of all time. By incorporating the SCR 508 radio, the M4 Sherman evolved from a serviceable medium tank into an essential element of a broader armaments framework encompassing every other U.S. tank in the fray. Such an evolution held more strategic impact than any enhancements to armor or armament might have delivered. Each Sherman bore the instruments of success not solely through its 75mm cannon or angled shielding, but via the 181 pounds of radio gear that linked its operators to their counterparts in every other American tank. This linkage forged a shared awareness and decision-making prowess that no solitary German tank, despite any advantages in armor or firepower, could hope to rival. The harsh lessons of combat revealed this truth to German troops. In the rugged terrain of Kasserine Pass within Italy's mountains, amid the bocage landscapes of France, and during the climactic clashes on German soil, U.S. armored units exhibited a level of synchronization that, according to Wehrmacht principles, could not occur absent direct line of sight. The German military failed to devise a viable response, largely because it never grasped the full extent of the disparity in technology. Whether precisely recalled or legendary, the remark attributed to Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel upon Germany's capitulation, "We knew how to build better tanks, but you knew how to make them work together," encapsulated an essential reality. The United States produced more than mere vehicles with its 49,324 Sherman tanks. It created 49,324 interconnected elements, forming the inaugural networked system for armored combat on the battlefield. What scholars term the transformation in military strategy, linked to today's network-centric operations, truly originated in 1942, coinciding with the debut of a Sherman tank equipped with an SCR-508 radio in active fighting. At that point, the nature of warfare underwent an irreversible shift. The faction boasting better communication networks would ultimately triumph over the one with more advanced armaments. The interconnected system would outmatch the standalone unit, and the linked forces would prevail against the detached ones. This profound shift unfolded mostly undetected by the German military. While they observed the evident edge in American battlefield tactics, they failed to grasp the underlying technological basis until it was far too late. Only after German officers realized that each Sherman tank was equipped with radio systems unavailable to the majority of their own vehicles did the conflict's outcome become irreversible. The Wehrmacht's oversight in identifying and responding to the U.S. advantage in communications ranks among the most significant lapses in intelligence during the Second World War. Even with numerous clashes on the front lines highlighting the benefits of American synchronization, German High Command consistently overlooked the urgent need to address their own glaring deficiencies in signaling. Instead, they persisted in developing exceptional tanks that operated as lone entities, whereas the Americans relied on serviceable tanks that functioned as integrated units. Ultimately, the signals transmitted via SCR-508 radios exerted greater influence than the destructive projectiles launched from German 80mm cannons. The capacity to synchronize actions, exchange data in real time, and engage as a cohesive entity instead of separate machines, this unseen edge shaped the war's result with greater certainty than any overt strengths in protection or firepower. The radio dominance of the Sherman tank revolutionized the nature of battle, cementing the idea that in contemporary warfare, linkage ensures endurance, while separation spells doom. Across theaters spanning 3 continents, German soldiers confronted this truth belatedly, coming to see that the United States held not only a quantitative lead, but a critical technological lead in the realm that truly counted: the power to operate in unison.